You may be seated, thank you.
All right. Before we get started with our next witnesses, do we need Ms. Sumner, or can I proceed?
I think you can proceed with that. She'll be in momentarily.
Okay. Yesterday I had indicated that we would be going to the Cop Theater on Friday morning, and because it's an open forum in all court proceedings, anyone was entitled to go. It's come to my attention that Cobb has objected, and understandably so. Bottom line, I misspoke. That is not an open forum. It's their private property. So the public is not invited to go tomorrow, and neither is the media. Media is welcome to stay outside the theater, but I don't have any authority over the Cobb Theater. They're private business. They're entitled to close their doors to whoever they see fit, just as if a private citizen, we can't just go barging into their residency because the court decides to go there. That's not how we operate. So if any members of the public wish to go, they'll have to wait outside just like anyone else, just like the media will. So it's not going to be a public viewing. And I believe Mr. Reeves is okay with that. Mr. Escobar?
He is, Your Honor.
All right.
In fact, Mr. Reeves will not be attending either.
Okay. All right. So with that announcement, who's our next witness?
Your Honor, the defense would call Detective Buson.
All right.
I'm just going to run upstairs, get my iPod.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. You know I would otherwise. Thank you, Mr. Martin. We certainly will need someone from the state here, though.
You got a pretty empty desk right now. We'll take it that way.
I know. Do you know where your witness is?
Right outside.
Okay. Buson?
He's up at the front office, as far as doing that.
Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, Detective Buson.
Good afternoon.
Detective, would you please give the court a bit of your history concerning your educational background?
Obtained my bachelor's degree in 2007. I've attended various training classes related to my duties with the sheriff's office.
Give the court, do you know that list by memory?
Some of them.
Okay, why don't you give the court a little bit of background concerning the courses that you've taken postgraduate. It's my understanding that you graduated from Florida Gulf Coast University, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that was with a Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice?
That's correct.
And I know that you joined law enforcement with the Pasco County Sheriff's Office in the year 2000.
Correct.
And I believe that the courses that you're talking about are the courses that you took once you became a deputy there with the Sheriff's Office. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You were a patrolman for 5 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And during that time, you were working within this particular county enforcing the laws of the state of Florida. Is that correct?
Correct.
In 2005, you were promoted to the detective division in the property section. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and you worked in that property section between 2005 and 2009.
Correct.
Now, in 2009, you were transferred into what's called major crimes, and that was a homicide and crimes against person type of division. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Tell the court, please, what type of crimes you investigated when you were in major crimes.
Child abuse, rape, robbery, homicide,
Okay. And how long were you in major crimes?
until 2013.
Okay, so between 2009 and 2013, about 4 years.
Correct.
Okay. Now, even though you were in major crimes and you were responsible for handling homicides, homicides were not necessarily regularly given to members of that unit. In other words, it was a luck of the draw.
Correct.
And during that 4-year period, you only became the lead homicide detective in only one major homicide, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Actually, one homicide period, not even major, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you're in major crimes till 2013, and during that period of time, you were taking some courses. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I believe the courses that you took dealt with the investigation of homicides themselves. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I believe you took a crime scene course.
Crime scene reconstruction.
Okay. And that was a course that was geared pretty much for homicide detectives?
Major crime, sure. Anyone that investigates person's crime scenes.
And that course was geared to giving you the skills to properly preserve evidence in its most virgin state, correct?
Correct.
And that course also taught you how to identify evidence that was going to be relevant and useful in the investigation of cases like a homicide.
Yes.
And so you would gather facts, you would see evidence there at the scene, and you would try to correlate that evidence there at the scene, what was important, what you needed to do right away with that piece of evidence, what you could wait, all those factors.
Sure.
Now, you did assist homicide between that 2009 and 2013 period, even though you weren't the lead homicide detective in just one. You assisted in homicides doing interviews, for example, right?
Yes.
And actually being the crime scene detective.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so you used those skills that you had learned in those particular courses. There was a variety of courses that you took. Is that correct?
Correct.
And one was, let's see. Unresolved death investigation course.
Correct.
And you took another general homicide investigation course. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that crime scene reconstruction course as well? Is that another
Yes.
one you took?
Yes.
Okay. In that crime scene reconstruction course, one of the things that was very important for you as a crime scene detective is that you wanted to certainly do everything that you could to prevent contamination of the scene. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that means prevent physical contamination, meaning contamination of the items there at the scene, as well as witness contamination.
I don't recall that them specifically talking about witness contamination. It was more focused on evidentiary contamination.
Are you familiar with witness contamination?
I am.
And that's something that has been taught to you as early as your early days of the police academy.
Yes.
And that's a process that you learned very early on and have used throughout your career.
Correct.
That whenever you're investigating a case, one of the most important things that you can do is to prevent witness contamination.
Yes.
Now, at some point in time, you became very interested in possibly working within the Pasco County Sheriff's Office cybercrime unit. Is that correct?
I was assigned there when the unit started in 2013.
But you knew that there was rumblings about talking about developing this particular unit.
They started training some of us in digital forensics, getting us started with it.
And so you started taking some training courses in that particular field because that was a field of interest to you.
Yes.
And so initially, prior to even being selected for that unit, you took a course that was called Basic Data Recovery with the National White Collar Crime Center.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Basic data recovery and acquisition.
And when we're talking about data recovery, we live in the digital world now, don't we?
We do.
And that's what you're talking about, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, after going to that basic data recovery, you also went into another course called Intermediate Data Recovery and Acquisition course, and that was with the same program that you had done your basics with, correct?
Correct.
That was a more advanced course to learn as much as you could about digital preservation.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And was that course also before you were selected for the cybercrimes unit?
Yes.
You then took a course called Encountering Digital Evidence at the Scene.
Yes.
And that was a course that was heavily focused on preserving, locating, preserving that digital evidence there at the scene of your investigation.
Yes.
And what processes to use in order to preserve that particular data, correct?
Correct.
Certainly not allowing other people other than law enforcement control that data.
Correct.
When do you actually start your career in the cybercrime unit?
2013.
Okay. And so this was now a fairly new unit, correct?
Yes.
And how many individuals started that unit for the Pasco County Sheriff's Office?
3.
3. And what month of 2013 would you say that started?
April.
April. Okay. So in April of 2003, you had 3 individuals. All these 3 individuals were also going to the same courses that you were attending?
That was the goal, not necessarily in that order, but yes, to get them trained in that same capacity.
Before you all would start this new division?
Yes.
Is that correct? And who were those other officers that started in cybercrimes?
Detective Lindsay, excuse me, and Detective Pepinella.
Do you want a bottle of water?
I'm okay.
Okay. Okay. So April of 2013, you get started, and a major focus of your division was going to be the investigation of the exploitation of children via the internet. But a secondary and very important part of your position there with cybercrimes was going to be to lend support to the other detective divisions of your department.
True.
And so if a homicide unit needed you in order to go and do some data recovery and data imaging, digital data imaging, you would be available in order to assist them, yourself or one of your other detectives that were within your unit, correct?
Correct.
And you had, in addition to those 3, you had some outside support because you had available to you the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, which had a pretty sophisticated forensic digital department, correct?
They do.
And you also had access to the FBI, if need be, in order to seek out their help and their expertise.
Yes.
Okay. So now this unit is in operation, and you took another course in 2013, which was called Seized Computer Evidence Recovery. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I believe there was even, at the end of the title, it was seized computer evidence recovery specialist.
That's correct.
Okay. And so that was a course that dealt with what? Please tell the court what that dealt with.
It dealt with performing digital forensics primarily on Windows-based computers using FTK and NCase, which are software programs.
Okay. And when you took that course and you finished that course, did you believe at that point in time that that gave you the expertise to do the job that the cybercrime unit requested of you?
Yes.
You're pretty well trained.
I'm on my way. I mean, you're always learning, but yes.
Because times are changing.
Right.
But you always have all these other sources to reach out to if you need be, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so between 2013 and 2014, various departments that wanted to preserve evidence, for example, on a computer or on a DVR or on a mobile phone, would reach out to your department in order to seek that service.
We would help other departments, primarily our own, but we would help others.
Okay. Now, and that would include homicide if they called.
Yes.
Now, that was made clear when, in the inception of your program, that was made clear to all departments that you were there to help, correct?
I don't know what notification we would have given to other departments, but certainly within our own agency.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm
Yeah.
not saying Tampa Police Department or Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. I'm saying the other departments within the Pasco County Sheriff's Office knew that you were there available for that service.
That's correct.
Now, the date of this incident, I'm going to direct your attention to January the 13th of 2014. You were asked to respond to the cop theater that day. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And at the time that you were asked to respond to the cop theater, you were a member of the cybercrimes unit.
That's correct.
No previous instructions were given to you prior to you reporting to that theater. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And when you got there, you met with, I believe, a guy by the name of Sergeant Sessa.
Sergeant Sessa, yes.
And who was Sergeant Sessa?
He was a major crime sergeant for the District 3 squad.
Okay. And Sergeant Sessa met with you and actually took you into the crime scene itself for a walkthrough.
Yes.
And as an experienced detective yourself, you realized that that was an important function, an important investigative tool for you if you were going to be interviewing people there at that scene.
Correct.
Because you get an eyeballs view of what was there located at the scene, you get a layout of the theater, it would allow you possibly to ask better follow-up questions or basically to ask questions, period, right?
That's correct.
And so you walk through that scene with Sergeant Sessa, and then Sergeant Sessa said, I want you to go check and see about this, see if there's any video surveillance equipment there at the cop theater. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe it was Sergeant Sessa, but yes, I was asked to check for video surveillance.
Okay. And so you do that. He's your sergeant, right? Or the sergeant there in charge.
Right, he's one of the supervisors, so yes,
Okay.
I do that.
And so you go out trying to find someone that you can make that request to.
That's correct.
And you find someone, you don't know what his actual title is, but you believe that he was in some sort of managerial capacity.
That's correct.
Okay. And you make that request to that individual, correct?
Yes, I inquire about video surveillance.
And that individual goes away to try to call somebody concerning your request.
He doesn't go away.
I would object to that. It's called some speculation what the person was going to go do.
What did this individual do
He was making phone calls.
after you made that request?
Yes,
Okay.
he was checking.
And at that point in time, Detective Aaron Smith comes up and says, Detective Buson, you don't have to worry about that. I'm going to take over.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, he conveyed that that was going to be his responsibility. He was going to take over gathering any video. He was going to take over.
Okay. And so, at that point in time, there wasn't much for you to do there.
No, there wasn't.
And so you decided, okay, I'm out of here.
More or less, I mean, in case if I was still there, if I was needed for something.
They
but-
could call you.
Right.
Okay. Now, of interest was that Detective Lindsay was also there, correct?
I don't know what he was doing, but yes, he was there at one point.
Okay, would you remind the court who Detective Lindsay is?
He was a detective with the cyber crimes unit.
And he
at
would
that
have
point.
had the same expertise as you? Same
Similar.
training?
Similar, yeah, I mean, it's not.
Now, when you were asked initially to go and see if there was video surveillance there of this incident, you realize the importance of that request, right?
Yes.
Because if there's video surveillance of a homicide taking place, you want to do everything you can to watch it, preserve it, correct?
Correct.
So that you can use it in your investigative process.
Correct.
And not only do you want to watch it, but you want to control it yourself.
We want to get a copy of it. We want to preserve the footage. Yes.
And you're going to control that process.
If that's my task, yes, I'm gonna. If I'm assigned to give video surveillance, yes, I'm gonna take that.
You're not going to hand it off to anybody else to do, meaning non-expert, like a private entity.
No, if I'm tasked with getting video surveillance, that's what I'm gonna do.
In fact, I think you testified earlier that as a crime scene detective, the preservation of evidence, especially as important as surveillance, you're going to make sure that it's done right.
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm going to object to the further line of questioning regarding whatever efforts Detective Buson may or may not have done at Top Theater. We're into an area that I reasonably believe and anticipate is, again, we're attempting to show some type of attack, if you will, on the police investigation. I'll remind the court that we're talking about the videos we've already watched. We've already had testimony that they've been authenticated. Even if there was some sort of impropriety here or there, whatever, nothing happened to the videos, everything was preserved. So it's not relevant to any issue. He can't use the testimony to keep the videos out. The videos are already in. We've already agreed what they are. This is not a case where we're attempting to establish reasonable doubt, where you would attack the investigation in order to show what's lacking. As I've argued before, they can't establish their burden of reason, whether or not Mr. Reeves was reasonable by showing what the Pasco Sheriff's Office did or did not do. So there is no relevancy to this in this immunity hearing. So I'm going to object to this line of questioning. Seeing how now that Mr. Buson has said, I'm done with the video, if he wants to ask Detective Smith, then I may or may not have the same objection. But right now, what he would do is not relevant because of what Detective Smith did. So even then, I would be objecting. So I'm going to object to this line of questioning being not relevant.
Judge, I think you've ruled in our favor on this in the past, and this is going into what I was talking to the court concerning the evaluation by this court of not just Mr. Buson, but every other member that Mr. Buson came in contact with that may have been responsible for certain aspects of the criminal investigation. They're going to be introducing testimony and evidence in this particular case concerning Detective Smith, what he did, what he didn't do. We're going to be having experts talk about what Detective Smith did, what he didn't do, what he did right, what he did wrong. And so this whole process goes to the evaluation by this court as to whether the court should believe any or part of Detective Aaron Smith's testimony, whether the court should have any confidence or lack of confidence in any testimony of any officer that was involved in this investigation. So you can't take this in isolation. And just to let the court know how ironic this is that at the very end, Detective Smith had to go right back to Detective Buson to get those very hard drives image that he told Detective Buson he was going to handle. So This goes full circle. It's going to be very important in our presentation of the case, and I'd like permission to proceed.
Judge, if they want to, after Detective Smith testifies, and maybe even as I tried to get the evidence in, they want to bring an expert back in and said, you know, this wasn't done correctly. The bottom line, Judge, is whatever Detective Smith and Detective Buson did, the state and defense have already indicated that it's authentic. There was no manipulation, and that there is nothing wrong with the imaging of that hard drive. So you can't, we've already stipulated, it can't go anywhere. And so it's not relevant.
Judge, it's very relevant. If I am a crime scene detective and I fail to preserve this, and I fail to preserve this, but somehow I'm lucky enough to preserve this. The fact that I haven't properly preserved these two items is important consideration for the court. Important consideration whether the court can even believe at this point in time that I've done anything probative and right here. It's done in all of our criminal cases. We can't take this in isolation. And Detective Buson is going to be talking, I think it's going to be important for the court, of the proper procedures to employ. He's a Pasco County detective, and he's going to tell this court the proper procedures that should have been employed in this particular case in the preservation of not just the hard drives, but the preservation of everything, including a phone that was there at the scene that became a very relevant issue in this particular case. And so I would ask the court to allow me to continue in my direct examination of Detective Buson.
We have the same issue. Now we bring in the phone. The only reason I bring that up, we now have a stipulation as to what exactly was or was not on the phone. It's a non-issue. We're wasting. You can't impugn, okay, this was done, therefore the entire department didn't do everything right. Look, if they want to attack Detective Smith and there's something wrong with the flash drives that they've already said were authentic, I'll deal with that now. But to go into all the evidence that we've already agreed to what is or is not in there is not relevant because of the stipulations we've entered into.
Judge,
now, we're already going into next week with the defense case. My case has already been pushed back one day, if not two. We only have 2 weeks set aside. I mean, where are we going to go with this? When are we going to stop, this, well, we're going to bring in every detective and start criticizing what they did or didn't do when it's not relevant to anything because we stipulated the evidence in.
Judge,
we've got to stop sometime.
Judge, we stipulated that the 10 hard drives that were given to us by the sheriff's office, that our experts believe that those particular 10 were not tampered with. However, if you remember John Silas's testimony yesterday, he retrieved not 10, but 15 hard drives from the Cobb Theater. The Pasco County Sheriff's Office only got 10 hard drives from the Cobb Theater. So there's a means to my madness. This is very important evidence that this court should consider. And I'm not wasting the court's time. I'm not wasting anybody's time, but it's evidence that needs to be considered so that this court can make a proper evaluation of all the evidence.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection.
Now, Now, Detective Buson, were you ever up in the upstairs IT room, DVR room of the Cobb Theater?
No.
Certainly, if you were to have continued in your original assignment, in this case to preserve the video surveillance footage in this case, one of the first things you would have done is you would have said, let me see your DVR room.
Yes, I would have wanted to interact with the system and preserve the video footage that's relevant.
And you're aware, because of your expertise, that these DVRs have proprietary components that allow you to actually copy certain segments of the footage right then and there.
Software, yes.
Is that correct?
Correct.
You've done it, plenty of times.
That's correct.
And in addition to that, what you want to do is you want to get all of the specs for all of the equipment. You want to get the specs for the DVRs. You want to document all those specs, correct?
Correct.
You want to see how many hard drives we have, correct? You want to document all those particular issues, because that's part of the process.
That's correct.
And then, as an expert, you make a determination as to whether you're going to copy certain segments from those particular units, or whether you're actually going to extract, take out the hard drives for imaging.
The removal of the hard drives would be like a last case scenario, like a worst case scenario.
Right.
But typically we want to use the software from the machine to preserve the video, to make a copy of the video.
Okay. And then based upon your conversations with supervisors and, maybe even the state attorney's office, you make a determination as to whether you want to do more.
Could be.
The one thing that you agree on is that if law enforcement doesn't take absolute control of that process, it could be bad.
As far as capturing, preserving the video,
Yeah.
I believe law enforcement should do that, yes.
Not give it to another entity to do it.
That's correct. Assuming that we have the ability to do so based on their system, yes.
And let's assume that for some reason you over there, you yourself don't have the ability to do it. So you call who?
I mean, it would depend on the situation. If I needed law enforcement help, I can call FDLE, or I can call, we would reach out to experts within law enforcement.
Including the FBI.
Yes, we could do that.
Okay. Because you want law enforcement to be in control of that process, right?
Yes.
Now, these proprietary tools that are inside the system itself, one of the functions of those tools is to be able to make a copy of what you want, right?
Ask and answer, Judge.
Correct?
Correct.
You've never encountered in your professional career, detective, a video surveillance system that did not have that kind of proprietary function, correct?
Now, every video surveillance system I've come into contact with has the ability to make a copy of footage.
You would agree that private business may have an interest different than law enforcement interest in preserving video surveillance?
Potentially.
And you would agree that your function as a detective in preserving evidence from video surveillance, it's not just to preserve evidence to inculpate or incriminate, but it's also to exculpate.
That's correct.
Because you want to preserve evidence not only for law enforcement that's there at the scene at the time of the alleged incident investigating the crime, but you also want to preserve evidence for the defense, who in most occasions is not there for weeks or months.
We want to accurately preserve the evidence best we can to the best standards
For everyone.
for everyone.
Especially if it's a homicide.
That would be particularly important, yes.
So the first thing that you do is you say, show me where your video equipment is. Let me see what we've got.
Typically.
And you go there and you watch that video, and that process of watching the video has incredible value, correct?
Yes.
Because now as a detective, with your own two eyes, you're being able to capture and see what's been captured by the system.
That's correct.
And no matter what happens at that point in time, you've seen it with your two eyes.
I have.
You've memorialized what you've seen with your two eyes.
I have.
And your next process is obviously to copy it, preserve it for everyone.
Correct.
Now, there are a variety of things that you could have done there with that system in addition to copying it with their proprietary software, correct?
That would be the best case scenario, would be using theirs, but if ultimately we weren't, yes, I mean, there's other things we could have done if need be.
If need be. And one of the things that you could have done, if need be, is you could have said, after speaking to supervisors and what have you, right? Because you do things as...
Had to follow orders, yes.
Yeah, okay. And so, one of the things that you would have done, if need be, is you pull the hard drives.
If it was decided to do so based on the scenario, yes, we could have done that.
And you could have taken those hard drives, actually that day, gone back to your office, used your equipment there at that office, imaged those hard drives perfectly, finished the imaging process, gotten those original hard drives if you wanted to, taken them back to the cop theater, placed them back in their equipment, and we would have had everything.
Barring the time it would have taken for the imaging process, yes.
How long does it take for an imaging process? You were fortunate enough in this particular case to image the very hard drives that initially Detective Smith told you not to worry about, that he was going to handle, right?
Well, he didn't mention the hard drive specifically. What he talked about was that he would be taking the responsibility of gathering video surveillance, so not specifically hard drives.
But the reality of it is that over a year later, he brought you those hard drives and said, Detective Buson, could you image these hard drives for me so I can use them with the FBI?
Yeah, I was asked to image the hard drives, yes.
Those very same hard drives.
Well, I didn't see the system, but yes, I was given hard drives to image.
However, you were only given how many hard drives?
10.
One thing is clear, is that if you were in charge of preserving that video surveillance, you would have never allowed the private entity Cobb to image those hard drives for you. You would never have assigned your duties to the Cobb Theater.
If the machine was on site, I would have done that myself.
Because you're competent to do it. Right?
Yes.
Because preserving evidence in its most virgin state is critical in your line of work.
That's correct.
Now, did anyone talk to you about a piece of evidence that was there at the scene, found at the scene, more particularly right between Mr. Reeves' leg on the floor, called an iPhone with a case?
No one directly mentioned an iPhone to me.
You've dealt with the preservation of iPhones as well, correct?
That's correct.
And there's a certain delicate way of handling iPhones, is there not?
Cellular phones in general.
Tell the court why they're delicate in their handling if you want to preserve in a virgin state what you had immediately prior to the incident.
You would want to block any incoming signals. You would isolate the device from any network or connection just to prevent any incoming or receipt of any destructive commands.
And if you're there and the phone's there on the floor and you're saying, well, I think we probably ought to, before I even touch it, let's see if we can get some DNA, you would have called forensics over and said, right there on the floor, let's go ahead and get your DNA. You want to get some fingerprints, let's get fingerprints, but under your watchful eye. You could have done that.
That's correct.
And then you would have been able to pick up that phone and certainly not turn it on and off.
Typically, we wouldn't. If we're going to do the device right there, we're not going to turn it off if it's on.
Tell the court why you wouldn't turn it off.
You could potentially lose data. And it's not a guarantee, but there's a potential for losing data. So you would want to keep it on. Best case scenario.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Escobar. Detective, would you please spell your last name for the court report?
Bossone.
What's your first name?
Anthony.
Cross.
No,
May this witness be released?
no.
Detective, you're free to go for today, I'm assuming?
He's under state subpoena.
Okay, but you're still under subpoena, and should you get called back, you'll need to make arrangements to come back. All right? Thank you. I don't think it'll happen today. Okay, thanks.
We're under subpoena as well, Judge, but it won't be anytime soon. Thank you, Detective
Okay.
Buson.
Who's next?
Defense called Susan Miller.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Go ahead.
Please state your name.
Susan Miller.
And you work, I see, for Pasco County Sheriff's Office.
That's correct.
What do you do there?
I'm a forensic investigator.
And how long have you been a forensic investigator?
Approximately 17 years.
Now, you responded to the Cobb Theater on January 13th of 2014, correct?
That's correct.
And who did you meet with when you arrived?
Initially, I met with our supervisor, Captain Steffens.
And Captain Steffens was in charge of the forensic investigation at that point?
That is correct.
When you arrived, you were tasked to take photographs and to process Mr. Reeves, is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Reeves at the time was in custody, is that correct?
Correct.
And you took Mr. Reeves to a theater next to Theater 10 to actually do the photography of Mr. Reeves and take fingernail clippings and scrapings.
That's correct.
When you first made contact with Mr. Reeves, he was handcuffed, is that correct?
Yes.
And he was taken into the theater, correct?
Correct.
For you to process him.
Yes.
At the time, Mr. Reeves had civilian clothing on, correct?
He did.
And then at some point, he changed into one of those white jumpsuits so that his clothes could be collected.
Yes.
When you first encountered Mr. Reeves, you noticed some redness on his eyelids.
I did.
And you weren't told, that wasn't pointed out to you by Mr. Reeves, for instance, he didn't say, hey, my eye's red or my eye's hurt, correct?
That is correct.
And the detectives likewise didn't point it out to you, say, by the way, forensic tech Miller, we've noticed some redness on Mr. Reeves' eye or eyes, and we want you to capture that in a photograph, correct?
That's correct.
That's something you noticed as part of your processing of Mr. Reeves.
Correct.
And so you took photographs of Mr. Reeves, seated, correct?
Yes,
Both in his civilian clothes,
that's correct.
and you took photographs of his hands because there were some abrasions and cuts on his hands as well.
Yes.
I don't have anything further on it.
Please support Mr. Michaels.
Good afternoon, Investigator Miller. How are you today?
Good, thank you.
When you took photographs, and Judge, if I could approach the witness. When you took photographs of Mr. Reeves, you did so using an agency camera, right?
That's correct.
Okay. If you just go through that 42 exhibits marked for evidence, defendants 42. It's a composite of, looks like they say 4 photographs, but it appears to be 5 photographs.
Has it been entered?
It has not yet been entered. It's identification 42. There's probably a lot more.
Yeah,
Are there multiple copies?
I think so. Okay.
So how many separate photographs were on there?
Your Honor, is that a question from the state? I didn't hear.
I said, how many separate photographs are in this composite? It appears there's multiple copies of this.
Well, that was our working copy. That's, you're more than welcome to use them, but they're not in a specific order for your presentation.
There are 10 photos here, so duplicates.
Judge, may I have a moment, counsel?
Do you recall how long you were on scene?
Several hours.
Then we'll recall Investigator Miller when it's our turn to present.
Okay. Nothing further?
Not this time.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mrs.
She may be released for today, and apparently she's
We'll
subject to recall, and we will also keep her on our subpoena subject to recall as well.
Okay. Mr. Miller, you're free to go today. Looks like you may be recalled. Please answer the call. Someone will call you, and you'll need to come back, and obviously they'll give you as much.
Wait, Judge. May I have just a moment, please?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll bring her back.
Okay.
We were told they weren't admitted.
Which one?
You did?
No, I didn't.
All right. Two have been admitted, obviously. You're subject to recall, and you're still under subpoena. Thank you. Who's next?
Your Honor, we would, at this point in time, call Deputy Christina Demas.
Stop right there. Do you solemnly swear from the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Detective.
Good
Excuse me,
afternoon.
Deputy Demas.
Good afternoon.
Deputy Demas, when I first deposed you, you were a detective in the Warrants Division, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now you're working K-9,
Correct.
which I understand you love.
I do.
Let me, if I can, go over a little bit of your background as a law enforcement officer. I know you've got many years, 16 when I deposed you, 18 today. Tell the court a little bit about your history as a officer with the Pasco County Sheriff's Office.
I started off on the road and went straight into vice and narcotics. After vice and narcotics, I went back to the road, and then I was a bailiff for 7.5 years, east and west side, and then went into the fugitive warrants unit. And after that, now I'm where I'm at, K-9 for the school resource officers.
I'm going to direct your attention to January the 13th of 2014 and ask you whether or not you got a call via radio that you were to respond to the scene of the Cobb Theater here in Pasco County.
Yes.
About what time do you think you got that call?
I'm not sure.
Okay. How long did it take? Well, first of all, where were you when you got the call?
Zephyr Hills.
Okay. How long did it take you to get from Zephyr Hills to the Cobb Theater that day?
Through traffic, about 10 to 15 minutes.
It's my understanding that when you got to the Cobb Theater, you were directed to go to the rear entrance of that theater,
Correct.
and that you actually followed fire rescue in to that location.
Yes.
It's my understanding that as you arrived there at that particular location, did you see officers bringing Mr. Reeves out of the theater?
Yes.
And he was in handcuffs?
Yes.
And did he appear cooperative?
Yes.
Did he give any resistance to any of the officers?
No.
Now, you proceeded right into the theater.
Correct.
And you opened that door, and when you looked in that theater, what was the appearance?
It was pitch black, and it was a lot of stuff going on. A lot of people running around, paramedics were trying to get in. So I stood in the doorway and let my eyes affix to the darkness because it was still pretty dark inside.
Okay. As you've got that door open and you're looking in, do you see a congregation of people?
Not at that moment, I did not.
What are you able to see other than?
Just the paramedics trying to get up to the subject who was laying down at the time. I saw a female subject
that was later identified as the wife, crying and holding her hand. And then everybody else just trying to get things together. It was a lot of chaos going on.
In fact, so chaotic that you found it difficult to know where to go and what to do.
I was just waiting for basically somebody to tell me what to do.
Okay. Now, that first assignment you received was to tape off the theater area, is that correct?
Correct.
And tell the court how you did that.
I obtained a roll of the yellow tape, sheriff's office tape, from another deputy. I started at one end. I got about 2 feet into it and was stopped. And then after I was stopped, it was by the son of the person who did the shooting. After that, I continued with the tape, closing off the area of where the incident had occurred.
Your contact with Matthew Reeves was short?
Very short.
Okay, and you wanted to obviously pass him over to another officer to have him interviewed?
To at least a detective who was handling the case.
Was he still having blood and what have you, or had he cleaned up by that?
No, he still had it on his hands.
Blood?
Blood.
Okay. Was it at this time that you noticed the group of patrons congregated on one area of the theater?
As I completed the tying off of the crime scene tape to the other side is when I noticed that there were other people still at the other end.
Now, while you were there near that group of individuals, did you ever see any police officer give any instructions to those people not to discuss what they had seen in the theater amongst themselves?
I did not.
Did you give those individuals any instructions not to discuss what they had seen there at the theater amongst themselves?
No.
Now, you're familiar with the word witness contamination, are you not?
Yes.
You've been trained even from the early days of your academy. One of the first basic things that they tell you in investigative tool is you got to prevent witness contamination.
Yes.
Give the court the definition that you've been trained in witness contamination.
When you arrive on scene, it's very important to separate all the witnesses from everybody else because they start talking and then they get things put in their head that they may have not seen or heard, and you can't get rid of that once they hear it.
They start believing it themselves.
Correct.
And then once it's in there, you can't get it out.
Usually.
And so witness contamination would be very important in a scene like this where you have multiple people that are gathered together.
Objection, speculation.
I'll allow it to the extent that she knows.
That would be important to you, wouldn't it? To make sure that that doesn't happen.
It would, but there was a lot of people there, so I think they tried to do the best they could to separate them.
Okay. How many officers were there initially with you?
I would say about 10 that I remember seeing.
Okay. And then at some point in time, the detectives came, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what happens? Tell the court what happens when the detectives normally come onto the scene like that.
Normally they take over. They start doing their own investigation, and we usually are either free to go or tasked with other areas of things to do.
I would imagine, though, Deputy, that if there's so many people there at the scene, they would want to have every law enforcement body to help, right?
It's objection, speculation.
Yeah, I'll sustain. Rephrase.
Well, let me ask you this question. You were there already, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so you were given some instructions
Yes.
by the detective units when they came.
Yes.
Okay. Tell the court what those instructions were.
After I was done doing the crime scene tape, I walked out into the snack area, and I was handed a stack of written statements and a handful of pens, and was asked if I could hand out all of them to the subjects sitting in the snack area.
Okay, so let's talk about those subjects sitting in the snack area. You're talking about the session area, correct?
Correct.
Tables?
Correct.
People sitting around tables?
Yes.
Big congregation of people?
At the tables, yes.
Okay. And you witnessed those people talking to each other?
I don't know if they were, I can't say they were talking about the incident.
But they were talking?
They were talking.
Okay. And so you go up to them and you start handing out papers, is that correct?
Yes.
Forms, they're called statement forms,
Statement
right?
forms.
But at no point in time while you're handing out those statement forms are you telling them, hey guys, you can't be talking about anything that you saw in that theater amongst yourself.
I did not.
Now, those forms were filled out by witnesses, sometimes 4, 5, 6 to a table,
Yes.
side by side.
Well, as close as you could at a circular table.
Now, after you did that, what was the next assignment that was given to you?
I was done.
What do you mean you're done?
I asked if there was anything else anyone needed. I was told no, and I was free to leave.
Deputy, did you just tell me that there was a ton of people there and that the more officers that were there to help, the better?
Objection, ask and answer. She already testified to that, Judge. He's now trying to recap.
Why would they let you go in a scene?
Objection, speculation.
How long were you there? Total?
I'm not exactly sure. I would say 45 minutes, an hour.
No further questions, Your Honor.
And before they start, Corporal, could you give the court reporter the spelling of your name first and last?
Yes, first name is Christina with a CH. Last name is Demus, D as in David, E M as in Mary, A S as in Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. May it please the court. Mr. Escobar, good afternoon. Corporal Demus, how are you this afternoon?
Good, how are you?
Now, you indicated that you've been with the Sheriff's Office approximately 17 years, correct?
18.
18, excuse me. Sorry
It's
about
all right.
that.
It's
1
fine.
year closer, that makes a big difference, right? You indicated that you were called to the Cobb Theater in Zephyr Hills. Do you recall what time you were called to there?
I do not.
And when you say you were called to there, were you specifically dispatched to the Cobb Theater, or did you overhear the call come out on the radio and decide to go yourself?
I overheard the radio, and my partner, who was driving at the time, said, let's go, and we responded.
Who was your partner at that time?
Detective Monty Schuler.
So you and Detective Schuler were working in your capacity as warrants detectives in the area of Zephyr Hills at that time,
Yes,
and you all took it upon yourselves to believe that, hey, we need all hands on deck with this call.
yes,
At that time, you were unsure as to whether or not it was an active shooter. Isn't that correct?
that is correct.
And you don't recall specifically what time you arrived. Is that correct?
Correct.
But when you all pulled in, you were waved or flagged by somebody at the rear entrance of the Cobb Theater.
Yes, and followed fire rescue. We followed fire rescue.
And would
Yeah.
that have been at the west, I guess that would be the southwest area of the building? Or was it the south or northwest area of the building?
I'm terrible with directions. It was the back of the building, that's all I can say. It was the back of the movie theater.
So if the Cobb,
Oh, wait, no,
if the signage was facing to the right as you come in, did you go to the left of the signage or did you go around the building?
around the building.
Okay, so you went around the building. Was it that corner there, closest to the signage, or the back of the building?
You know, I don't recall because I wasn't driving, I'll be honest with you.
Okay. So you went around the building?
Correct.
Not sure how far around?
Correct.
Okay. And who was the first officer that you saw on scene?
The only person I saw was, I want to say, I think he's a corporal, Gondik. He was bringing
Bringing
Mr.
out
Reeves
the defendant,
out.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Travis Gondik?
Yes,
And then you proceeded into this theater with Detective Schuler at that time?
you know, honestly, I don't even remember where he went. I kind of went on my own.
Okay. And when you went in, did you believe you were going into Theater 10 where the shooting occurred?
Yes.
Did you see Corporal Jessica Jalot in the theater?
I think later on I did. I don't remember if I saw her right then and there.
And who was it that gave instructions to you when you arrived on scene?
I don't recall.
Okay. You don't recall who told you to start roping off?
No.
With the crime scene tape?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
From who did you get the crime scene tape to start roping off?
That I don't remember either.
Now, you indicated that it was chaos within the theater.
Correct.
You indicated that as you got about 2 feet, so basically about 2 feet into roping off, when you say the front of that theater seat, so you're talking about where the yellow railing was?
Where the railing was, correct.
So you get about 2 feet, maybe a seat and a half into roping off. You were stopped by someone who identified themselves as the son of Curtis Reeves?
Yes.
Okay. And at that time he inquired of you whether or not his father had been arrested, isn't that correct?
He did.
And what did you respond to him?
I said yes, he had been.
Okay. And at that time, did that person who identified himself as, did he identify himself as a law enforcement officer to you?
I believe he did.
At that time, did he indicate to you, whoa, wait a minute, why are you arresting my father?
No, he did not do that.
Did he respond to you that, I heard my father say, get out of my face, why are you arresting him?
No.
Did he respond to you that he had seen the person who was shot take an exaggerated step down off the seats? Why are you arresting my father?
No.
Now, you indicated there were a large amount of people there in the theater. Where in the theater were this large amount of people?
It wasn't a large amount. It was probably about 7 or 8 people. It was to the, if I'm facing the back of that movie theater and the screen is behind me, there was a ramp that went to the right down, like handicapped access.
Okay.
They were there. I guess they must have been asked to move to that area.
So you indicate that, it's your recollection, you saw about 7 people on the ramp.
Correct.
And at that time, you didn't interact with any of those people.
I did not.
Was there any discussions on what you could do to separate any of these people at that time?
No.
Do you recall seeing Corporal Gillot at that point?
I believe when I remember seeing her out outside of the movie theater, in the hallway, still inside the movie theater itself, but not that theater. The
Okay.
hallway where you can get to all the other movie theaters.
The main quarter,
exactly.
where the theaters are left and right of
Correct.
that main quarter?
Correct.
All right, so at that time she wasn't in the theater. You had these 7 people. There was no discussion of where you could put these people.
No.
Who was it that told you go ahead and go out to the concession area?
I don't recall who it was. I asked, does anyone need assistance? And I was pointed towards the snack area and was told, ask whoever's out there if you can help them.
Okay, so getting back to those 7 people that are over there near the handicap ramp area by the yellow railing, who did you leave in charge of those 7 people?
There was people, I guess there was other officers still inside the movie theater.
How many
with them.
officers were inside that theater tent at the point that you walked out?
I want to say possibly 3, maybe 4.
Any that you recall names, faces?
I don't.
You would have known all these officers that were there,
Absolutely.
right, in your 18 years?
Absolutely.
So at that point, those 7 people, you didn't bring those 7 people out with you to the concession area?
I did not.
And when you went out to the concession area, how many tables are in the concession area?
I want to say 4 or 5.
And when you come out into the concession area, just so we can get an idea, as you enter the building, after you purchase the ticket, you walk in, at what area is the concession tables area?
It's directly in front of it. There's a big open area in front of the doors, and then the snack area is pretty much centralized.
So at what side of the snack area are these tables?
If you're walking through the front door, it would be to the right of the snack shop.
And you indicated that these were approximately 4 tables, you thought?
I'd say 4 or 5 tables.
And how many chairs were at each table?
I believe 4 or 5. I'm going to say more of 4.
So it would be impossible for 6 people to be sitting at one table unless they were standing around it, right?
I would say yes.
So as far as when Mr. Escobar tells you there's 4, 5, 6 people at a table, that's not necessarily true, is it?
I would say 4 or 5.
And were there other places where you could further separate these people?
I don't. In my opinion, no, there was not.
You all did the best you could with the facility that you had, correct?
I would say yes for them.
And as far as not overhearing any particular deputy not telling them to discuss it among themselves, you can't say that didn't happen. You just didn't hear it, correct?
That's correct.
And as far as hearing people talking, you can't give us an idea of any particular words you heard any particular person saying, can you?
Correct.
They could have been talking about the weather. They could have been talking about whether or not they're going to get a refund for their ticket price. A multitude of things they could have been discussing, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Redirect?
Please, Your Honor. Detective Demas, since you arrived with Detective Schuler, I would imagine he was released after 45 minutes as well.
Yes.
So now it's not only one officer released from a scene that you defined yourself as very chaotic, but now there's two officers.
Judge outside the scope and relevance.
Well, so that's it.
Yeah, I don't think it's outside the scope and all.
Now they released two officers, you and Detective Schuler, is that correct?
Correct.
And Detective Schuler was also with a detective with the Warrants Division?
Yes.
Now, something that the prosecution asked you during cross-examination, and I think is rather important, was when Mr. Matt Reeves approached you that day. You cut him short because you didn't want to take his full statement, correct?
That is correct.
You wanted to direct him to someone else. Because your job was not to interview him. Your job was not to gather information from him. Until you told him, wait a minute, don't tell me anymore. I'm going to take you to someone that can interview you.
That's correct.
No further questions.
Let's be clear, Corporal Reeves. You didn't say, hold on, I don't want to hear any more to him, did you?
Not in that term.
Okay.
I said, hold on one second, let me get somebody for you that you can talk to.
But he still had the opportunity, law enforcement officer to law enforcement officer, to tell you whatever he wanted you to hear, correct?
Yes.
Nothing further.
One more. Do you think an experienced law enforcement officer, when you tell them, you're in uniform, aren't you? You've got credentials?
Mm-hmm.
And when you tell someone, hold on, I'm going to get you some, you expect someone to ignore you?
It depends on the situation.
You expect a police officer for the Tampa Police Department to ignore you?
In that situation, with him being the son, I don't know if he would have stopped at that point in time.
He stopped, didn't he?
He did stop.
Upon your command, correct?
He did.
No further questions.
May this witness be released?
Your Honor, we would like to keep her on, but she is probably not going to be called back.
All right. You're still under subpoena.
Okay.
You'll have to come back if you're called.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, can we have a 15-minute, we only have one more witness.
Okay.
Can we have like a 15-minute break, as I have not had the opportunity to speak to this witness in a long time. I'd like to be able to.
Certainly. Let's take a 15-minute break.
All rise.